Welcome to the Empowering Tomorrow's Automotive Software Podcast, brought to you by ETAS, a single source of cutting-edge software and hardware solutions that make automotive embedded systems safe, smart, secure, and sustainable. Each episode, we'll be joined by ETAS and industry experts to discuss how electrification, automation, and connectivity are impacting the automotive industry. Now, sit back and enjoy the discussion.
Hello, everybody. This is Eric Cesa again. Welcome to our podcast today. We've got a very special guest that I'm sitting down and chatting with here. I'd like to welcome Boris Scholl from Microsoft. Boris is a chief architect and partner for Microsoft's Cloud&AI business. He's got 23 plus years in the industry, leading product development, product management, program management, as well as development teams, planning, designing, developing, and releasing distributed systems and cloud platforms within the industry. Boris, welcome. I'm really looking forward to chatting here with you, and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, any additional remarks on your background? I know I probably didn't do it much justice in the first.
You covered it pretty well. I mean, I think the audience might wonder, what is a cloud dude doing in an automotive webcast? And that's because I spent pretty much like the last 2.5 years in the automotive industry, and I think we're going to chat a little bit about that because we're thinking about bringing like cloud native technologies into the automotive world, and so that's what I've done the last 2 years. But other than that, I think you summarized it very well.
Yeah. So okay, perfect. And so you really you hit on maybe my first question. So you're kind of coming in new to the auto industry. What do you see the automotive industry, or let's say software development in the auto industry, can learn from that maybe non-automotive software development?
Yeah, I think if you look at the journey that, like, I would say traditional database or data center customers have taken or have gone when they moved into the cloud, it's a similar journey for automotive, right? When we started looking into automotive, was actually like a coincidence, to be honest, because when I talk about automotive right now, I'm not talking about the back end systems. I'm really talking a little bit more about the in-car architectures, and that's, as far as I understand, the holy grail for all the automotive companies, right? So what we have learned is that those are highly specialized systems. They're super well written. There is a lot of thoughts and years of experience gone into developing that in-car software. But reality is that the times are changing for automotive as well, because your customers, like consumers, are expecting a little bit more than just the ordinary. I would say, hey, I need a new map on my navigation system. I need to take it to the shop. Type of service style. They're expecting actually like a car to behave more like a cell phone or like a computer. And that's where we actually came in, because one thing we've learned is, while those systems are highly optimized, they're also very coupled, right? They're basically written in a very monolithic way. And even more so, they're written like really with the hardware in mind. So it's really couple the hardware and the software to basically squeeze out and utilize the last bit, right? And that obviously comes at a cost, right? Because you're losing a lot of agility and velocity. And that's what we are think the automotive industry can learn, how to increase the release velocity for certain functionality. And I'm explicitly saying certain functionality because I believe, and I mean, that's obviously a given, there is certain safety and security functionality that will never change. But like the commodity functionality or user interaction functionality, nothing's preventing OEMs and tier ones to write it in a way like we write or develop cloud native software.
It's so interesting. So on the you see you see the auto industry moving to say, let's say, over design the hardware, so the hardware, the life of the hardware or the longevity of the hardware is longer than, let's say, we're traditionally or in the past have done it, in order to support features and functions that may be even unforeseen at the time of release.
Yeah, so I think there are two aspects. If we look far in the future, I
Yeah,
think I think automobile or any like vehicle in that sense, right? A truck, automobile, or even like a plane to a certain degree, is basically a distributed system, right? And if you think about bringing in or decoupling the software from the hardware and bringing in like certain abstraction layers that are actually in the works right now, if you think about Sophie and SDV and all
yeah,
those like initiatives that are ongoing, right? If you can decouple the hardware from the software, you get more flexibility. So in a sense that you don't need to plan like 5 years ahead of time. Hey, I need to max out the compute power or storage and anything that I have built in a car, because you can actually even think about if you have a distributed system in a car that you have can introduce a second release cycle, for example, right? So let's say you're going to lease a car and the car is shipped like from the factory, and then as you know, the services and the software is constantly evolving, right? So there is a greater need for more computing power or more storage. You can even think about if you really have that decoupling done right, when the lease is over and you want to resell the car as a dealer, you could even slap in a new, let's say, blade, so to say, like a new a device that extends the compute and storage capability of the car. And by doing that, you can add more functionality to it. So that's one thing you could do. Right?
so how does the software keep up with that? Like, how, what do you see, what changes do you see coming in order to implement, let's say, the really true complete CI/CD sort of tool chain that you see outside of the auto industry, anyways?
Yeah, I think so. As opposed to others, I think there is, if you think about typical AutoSAR or automotive critical
Yeah,
technologies like AutoSAR Classic, for example, right?
right, right.
Um, there is a huge desire when I was talking to customers to replace it, but frankly, I don't think that should be priority number one, to be honest, because I believe the first part in order to become more agile and leverage those new technologies and the power of software is you really identify or decouple also the functionalities. I'll give you one example. Um, if you think about a what's a good example, like a transmission, right?
Yeah,
So the shifting of the gear obviously needs to happen in real time, right? And then
right.
happens
Sure.
on a specialized controller, right? I don't think that will change anytime soon, and it cannot, because not a lot of systems or software are capable of delivering those hard real time and deterministic capabilities, right? But now, if
Yeah,
you think about like the shifting of gears and the transmission control as like a larger block, you could think, okay, you know what? Now, if you look at modern transmissions, they have like Eco Pro, right? And that's for the combustion engines, obviously, right? But you have different drive modes, right?
yeah,
There is
right. I mean,
nothing
this can even spill into the EV world. I mean, it's
exactly.
similar to
Yeah,
whatever ludicrous mode is in a
yeah.
Tesla, right?
So and now, if you think about, if you really kind of find a way to keep the system or the security critical components as they are, but you decouple the rest of the functionalities. For example, you implement like the transmission mode logic, right? And move it up a layer into a non safety security relevant domain, and you find a good way of abstracting that layer of safety and security and establish a good way of communicating, then you can think about it that you can introduce like things like a new driving mode over the air,
Right.
right? And once you can do that, because you're not touching those security and relevant things, you can do a lot of things in a cloud-based CI/CD flow, right? Because a lot of those apps that live in the QM domain or the non-critical domain, they're like right now everybody's containerizing this, right? You can have
Yeah.
containerized workloads.
Right.
If you have a right abstraction approach, you can have that abstraction layer also running, for example, on ARM-based machines in the cloud, and then you can do dev test for your entire thing, and then you can just roll out the or the comfort functionality into the car. Because cloud native also means that if the rollout, let's say the gear shifting doesn't work too well, right? If you really take it a step forward, then you should be able to roll back, right? So you
Yeah,
do an
for
update in a comfort mode and it's not working as expected, even though you tested it thoroughly and everything, you should be able to roll back and have like a fail safe type of thing. But
yeah,
I
right.
think
Like
that
like
situation, yeah,
there's
sorry.
yeah, right. Like no. This just there's always been this. I mean, the auto industry's always had the fail-safe mechanisms, whether they've been mechanical or electrical fail-safes in the end. But I think what you're saying is that there's a part there's a part of the stack that makes sense to develop in sort of a CI/CD continuous way, and then there's the part that's deeply embedded. Time critical based on the hardware that you probably aren't going to be updating regularly.
Yep, exactly. And the so what we have done in the software-defined vehicle open source working group, we actually introduced a project. It's called Chariot, and it was done like with a bunch of community partners like Bosch, ATOS, and others, right? Which is basically an abstraction layer. Because one thing that we've learned is was actually it's a funny side story because I talk to a lot of automotive customers trying to understand the in-car architectures, right?
Yeah.
And then I got like bombarded with like technologies, protocols, right? And there is this protocol, there is the other protocol, and
Yeah.
then
Right. Right.
you were asking someone, hey, why did you choose like that protocol A over protocol B? It's like, oh, we don't know. We've always done it that way, right?
Yeah.
And then so there is like this very heterogeneous environment that I think holds a lot of that transformation or modernization back because you always need to speak a certain protocol. What we have done now is, as a first step, is we basically introduced an open source project, as I mentioned, that abstracts away the deeply embedded devices and their protocols. So, in other words, as a developer, I can write this comfort functionality and I'll basically develop it against what we would call a digital twin. And that digital twin in the car, and think about a digital twin just being an object representing, in that case, probably a functionality or even an ECU, right?
Yeah.
That I program against it. And then the middleware layer has a provider pattern where you can plug in providers. So, for example, that communication between that functionality in ECUA is based on DDS, right? You can have a DDS provider, you can have a
Right.
SUM provider, and so on. And by doing this abstraction layer, I think we're going one step into that direction to really decouple it on a software level, right? That also allows to develop software in a, I would say, standardized way, um, regardless of what the underlying protocol or communication would be, right? So that also helps with adoption. Does that
Yeah.
make
That
sense?
the middleware. One. In addition to other things, the middleware becomes a translator between entities within the architecture. It's
Yeah.
so you mentioned open source. So obviously you've got quite a bit of experience with open source, and it's not something that's, I would say, widely adopted in the auto industry yet. But what are your thoughts on open source and how the auto industry can benefit from leveraging it? Because I think certainly there's something that we can learn from how other industries have implemented and used open source to let's say rapidly grow technology.
Yeah. I think open source is really like a driver for innovation, right? And a lot of customers I've talked to, they're kind of like concerned that they're giving away like their hard developed, like with sweat and tears developed
Hmm.
IP, right? That's really not what we're suggesting with an open source approach. What we're
Right.
suggesting is like, so I met with like 5 customers, and out of those 5 customers, there were like, I would say, 7 container runtimes developed, right? Because like every customer obviously develops their own container runtime, and then if you have a large company, they probably develop a container runtime per department, right? This is really non-differentiating software, right? This has been solved, and one thing where open source can help, and what we're trying to do, for example, with SDV, is to build that non-differentiating software that an OEM or a tier one can really focus on building the differentiating software, right? It doesn't make sense for everyone to reinvent the wheel and develop their own container runtime and put 10 people on it for like, I don't know, 3, 4 months, while this has been done like 100 times and probably
Yeah.
already
Right.
battle hardened, right? So that's the first part of open source where I would say, look, there is a lot of functionality in automotive that is really non-differentiating, right? And
I mean,
that,
just look at the AutoSAR stacks. I mean, at
yeah,
least the basic components of the stack.
yeah, exactly. So there's it doesn't make sense for companies to do that over and over, right? I
No.
mean, then there's the practical advantage of open source because you have more eyes on the software. You basically catch errors, security flaws, and so on and so forth. But it's really like in the automotive industry, like as a for or an industry that has been or is moving that direction, is really they should really think about it as a productivity gain as well, right? And that's part one. Part two is obviously with open source software, um, it opens up a new possibility for business models, right? Because right now, and I think there is a technology aspect in the automotive transformation, but there is also like a business aspect because a lot of companies have built their business models around getting a specification from an OEM and then basically putting together the software and the hardware and sending it over, right? So
Yeah,
now
for
with,
sure.
with this open source approach, obviously that changes the game a little bit, but to a degree that you can say, look, if you have a bunch of open source components that make up an in-car stack, right? Let's really scope it to an in-car stack.
Yeah.
Then the business model is because yeah, those are open source components, but they still need to be integrated. They still need to be
Right.
supported. Right? There still needs to be someone who takes liability if something falls apart. So there is a business model shift also into that direction, and I say, look, I don't need to spend like man years of development time for basic commodity functionality, but now we put together a stack that is based on open source components, and that stack is what we're going to support and move forward, right? So that's actually quite a known business model in the cloud world, right? Because if you look at like the hyperscalers, I mean, I'm at Microsoft. If you look at Google or Amazon, we all have Kubernetes services, right?
Right.
The way the way we differentiate is really like in the operation, supportability, and so on and so forth. And you can think about that the automotive industry can also benefit from that approach.
Yeah, and it's not like that methodology hasn't proven itself
Yeah,
ability to generate revenue for companies, right?
exactly. I mean, if you look at Red Hat, right? Red Hat makes billions of dollars, right? They're basically build an entire company around open source.
Yeah,
Um,
right, exactly.
but there is another aspect of open source that I always highlight, right? When I got pulled into the automotive industry, I mean, I realized how much standardization bodies there are, right? And it takes forever to push a new standard, right? In the open source world, if you have a large community, the standardization is actually through like adoption and usability, right? So going back to the SDV example, if the community works on that middleware abstraction stack and says, yes, that's how a middleware ought to look like, where you put in like a provider for DDS, some IP, and then you have like Bosch, Atos, Conti, Toyota, Carriot, and all those guys who are part of the community say, yes, that's the way how we should do it. Then you
Yeah.
have a standard, right? Without like going 5 years through a body, right? So it's a different type of standardizing software as well.
Yeah, standardization through adoption rather than standardization through committee,
Yep,
essentially,
exactly.
right?
And I'm not saying that standardization through committee is bad, right? I mean, even open source, you have technical steering committees and things like that. I
Yeah,
just
right.
think, based on my experience, it's a little faster, right? And
Yeah,
then
but if a technical committee, let's say, puts out something that doesn't meet the industry just doesn't adopt in an open source format, right?
exactly,
I mean, in some ways, and maybe you see this even now today. I mean, I think even in the standards, I mean, people aren't adopting all parts of AutoSAR all the time, right? I mean, if they find a better way, sometimes they're doing it themselves in some
yep,
cases.
that's true.
So how do you see what do you see Microsoft's role in this? And maybe that's a huge question, but
Yeah, so I mean, the way the way we look at it is, like, first of all, obviously we're a cloud provider, and we hope that a lot of backend services are running on Azure, right? I mean, that's no secret. That goes
yeah,
without that. Um, but there is also something where we say, look, because you might wonder, Microsoft's never going to take on any liability for in-car software, right? Why are we helping to set up like things like STV, right? Why are we working i- uh, with the Sophie folks, right? Even though we're not member, but we're working with folks from Sophie to really drive forward like an automotive community. And the reason being is that we believe we bring a lot to the table because we've done that with open source. Now, I think by now nobody argues anymore that Microsoft is not a big player in open source.
right.
Um, we have a lot of experience in how to drive things out in the open and then basically productize it, whether it's us or like even our competitors, right? And then obviously our interest then is in the backend in the cloud where we say, look, um, if you think about like cars producing lots of data, like ingest the data into Azure, but because in general, from a technical perspective, if you look at pretty much all the Azure services, we always support or we mostly support open interfaces, right? Because we also understand that multi-cloud and things like that and portability and freedom of choice, which provider you want to use, is a big decision factor for our customers. And that's why if from a Microsoft perspective, that we believe, okay, we help with like the in-car stack, we help with the technology. We frankly bring a lot to the table with regards to developers, right? Microsoft's been born as a developer company, if you think about it, right? So we
Yeah.
can help a lot there. And then we just believe that our cloud with our openness and everything is the best cloud to run like a lot of those backend systems. So um, like yeah, that's the bigger picture. We don't have any interest in like, hey, we're gonna reinvent or we're gonna invent a driving car or things like that. It's really like, hey, bring in our experience and be open and transparent, and then enable automotive customers to build their backend services, run and operate them best in our cloud.
Yeah, I mean that seems super smart to me because I think one the industry is figuring out how it moves forward, and I think there's some maybe you started off on the top talking about closed systems, and I think even today there's some where is the industry going to store all the data that it's creating, and I think there's some aversion to completely to complete non solutions that aren't within the walls of a given entity, let's say, because they've never really had to broach that sort of subject or work in that world. And I think comfort's going to have to come with time in that area would be my take on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the other thing, again, like, because while you were just talking about the data, right, I feel very, again, as I mentioned, bring a lot of experience to the table, not in the automotive space, right? But
Yeah, for sure.
think about like all the Windows desktops out there, right? We know how to update millions of devices, right? And our strategy is really to make Microsoft's strategy has always been like to make partners and developers successful, right? And so, from our perspective in the automotive game, is like really, hey, look, we have experience in how to update things. We'd love to partner, or we are partnering with like tier ones like Bosch, for example, on their mobility cloud solutions because our
Right.
goal is their clouds. You guys are the experts, right, in the automotive space. Our job is really to make your solutions run best on Azure for the most efficient way for you to operate them. That's really how you can look at it, right?
Yeah, it makes total sense to me. Um, so, hey, Boris, this has been a really cool conversation. I think there's a lot there's a lot of stuff coming, a lot of opportunities. I think Microsoft's glad to see you guys being part of the solution, especially in some of the open source stuff that we're doing around the SDV working group and the Eclipse Foundation. I think this has got super promise looking forward. But there's a lot of change coming. Glad to see you guys being a part of it. Any sort of parting words? And obviously, yeah, thanks a lot. It's a really good conversation, and thanks for spending some time with us. But any parting words from your side?
Yeah, I think for all the listeners, you guys should really check out the STV working group websites, right? And the more people and companies join the community, the more successful we'll be in really transforming the automotive industry, right? And again, there is no need to be afraid of anything because I think there's like also, in addition to the traditional business models, there are really new great business models evolving. But most importantly, I think together we can together, meaning like the software guys, the automotive guys, the community, we can really drive a change in the automotive industry, and that be really cool to see some of the listeners on the SUV working groups and so on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know. So unlike you, Boris, I've been in the auto industry my whole career for like 30 plus years, and I haven't seen this sort of rate of change. But I think you're right. Like some of your earlier comments around open, the speed at which we need to move. I think we need to make some changes in how we do our development, or else we aren't going to be moving fast enough. I would say so.
Yeah, I have one last remark there because it's kind of like really in the beginning, or as you introduced me, right? I've been doing cloud in Microsoft since day one, basically, right?
Yeah,
And first, it was like only the guys who really looked into the future and said, "Hey, new cool tech, let's try it," right? Then you always had industries that said, "Oh, we're never going to move into the cloud. Never. It's a non-starter for us. Will never happen," right? Even those industries are now moving into the cloud, right?
right.
And there is this huge digitalization going on, right? And transformation, digital transformation. And Satya once said, every company will be a software company, and it's
Yeah,
really becoming true. And now I think the last bastion is really like the automotive industry because they were holding on so long because it's been working so great, right? But even there, the change is coming through competition, but also through the end user, the
yeah,
consumer.
right. For the pull from the market, for sure. I totally agree. Yeah, definitely a fun time. A fun
Yeah.
time to be in the auto industry. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next 5 to 10 years. It should be A lot
Yeah,
of
me
fun.
too. I'm really excited to see where this goes because I really feel. I mean, as you said, I'm not in the auto or I've not been in this industry for a long time, but I see the excitement when I talk to people like architects or executives at the companies, right? And it's actually changing because when I started, there was a lot of hesitation and we would never do this, right? But now you can tell more and more companies are opening up, and I think that's what's really happening because it's gaining momentum, and then I think we can all drive the change together.
Yeah, I think the industry needs people like you helping us bring in different, some different viewpoints and mindsets into it because I think it's super cool to see guys like you coming into the fold into the industry and bringing that different viewpoint because I think like I said it's going to be super critical.
Yeah, and actually, it goes both ways, right? I learned a lot. I mean, in the cloud, we don't have real time, right? In that sense,
Yeah, right.
I learned a lot about those systems.
Yeah,
It's
some
actually,
stuff just it has to happen, and you better
yeah,
make sure it happens, right?
yeah,
uh, cool. All right. Thanks, Boris.
yeah. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Empowering Tomorrow's Automotive Software podcast. Please leave a comment or review with your feedback or what you'd like to hear in future episodes. To learn more about automotive embedded systems and ETAS's capabilities, visit our website at ETAS. That's ETAS.com.